All right, everyone. Welcome to the April 28th edition of the Quaranteam Chats. As usual, on Tuesdays, we're talking about finance. The agenda today will be, as usual, to first of all run through the latest updates in the news of government programs and other things that are happening to support small businesses. And then we're going to get into some top tips around pivots and around planning for pivots. And of course, Q&A, always welcome. As we go through this, please do use the chat feature or the Q&A feature. If you hover your mouse over the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, depending on where your controls are, a menu should appear up there and you should be able to type in a question on the chat. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live or videos after the fact on YouTube, really grateful for you to make the time in your day later in the day to watch this. If you'd like to join the next one, please go to entreflow.com. That's entreflow.com. And there's a convenient link right on the homepage of our website where you can find the links for joining for next time. These discussions are always great when we get lots of your questions, so I hope that we get them along the way, and we'll always pause to answer them at the appropriate point. Joining me on the webinar, we have a very special guest. His name is Dene, and he's with Intuit Canada. He's a business development manager. Prior to that, he worked for a few small businesses as well in a business development and marketing capacity. So he's seen pivots and put together some marketing plans and been in the trenches for it. And we're looking forward to having his insights here on pivots. Dene, do you want to say a few words to introduce yourself and Intuit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Ian, for having me here. So as you mentioned, I work with Intuit as a business development manager. My main role as of today is to help support some of our larger national partners adopt more of a cloud accounting technology, so a pivot in itself. Prior to that, I worked a lot in the marketing background, specifically in the accounting space, but also with a few SaaS applications as well. So very happy to be here and share any experience that I have, and looking forward to hopefully a lot of questions.
Sounds good, thank you. Many of you know me already. I'm Ian Rogers, the founder of Entreflow Consulting Group. My background before I started Entreflow and before I did the MBA was actually in marketing and business development myself. So I've had a few pivots in my career, but that is my background, and I love it. At this point, I'd like to give Colin Weston a minute or so to talk. The Quaranteam Chats are now officially co-presented by Startup Vancouver, part of Startup Canada. And we're grateful to have their support and have Colin on the call. You want to say hi, Colin?
Absolutely, and hello everybody. And I've had the pleasure of being on Quaranteam Chats for the last couple of weeks, and Ian and I, in the pure spirit of collaboration, just said we should actually partner on this because we've got an awesome entrepreneurship tribe. You guys are developing one in the innovation space and small business. Let's combine our superpowers. So here we are. So we are also going to be launching our own events with Startup Vancouver in concert with Startup Canada and some other partners, which I'll roll out in the next couple of weeks here for everybody. So stay tuned because we've got lots of interesting things that we're going to be doing alongside all the great things that we're going to be continuing to do here with Entreflow and Quaranteam Chats.
Thank you, Colin. All right, and a little bit about Entreflow. This is a firm that I started back in 2012 after finishing my MBA. It's since grown to a small boutique team of accounting and finance professionals. We help people with their planning and financial planning and analysis needs, and budgeting for marketing is a big part of that because a lot of our clients are growing quickly or have big plans for such. We also do recruitment and HR in a similar vein. We're trying to grow teams, grow successful culture, and of course, marketing and marketing strategy, and that's kind of my bag. So let's get right into it. The news. the most exciting piece of news for many small businesses is that the CEWS, or CEWS or CEWS, depending on how you want to shorten it, the wage subsidy, is now open. So businesses can now go to the CRA My Business account or the web forms application if they want to complete the application themselves. It's open. It was open as of yesterday. You can also contact your accountant and ask them to submit the application on your behalf if they have access to your CRA account. So we're doing this for some of our clients who are eligible and have indicated that they would like to apply. If you haven't decided if you're going to apply yet or not, I encourage you to check out the wage subsidy calculator, the eligibility information that's available online. And these links that we've got in the slides will be available to you after the session here. You can expect that you'll receive the money pretty quickly here, which is nice, as long as you've got direct deposit set up in your CRA account. Money will flow directly into your checking account that you've got it set up there. The CRA has really indicated that we started going through this application. We know that they're asking for payroll information. So information on who you have paid and how much, so that they can calculate how much the subsidy is. The eligibility requirements around the revenue, they are not asking for those numbers, but they are making it very clear that they want you to keep really good records of this, and you will get serious consequences if you are submitting fraudulent applications. So please keep really good records. If your books are not up to date, then please contact your accountant and or bookkeeper. Make sure that everything is in there. Revenue is booked in the right period, in the right month, for the right amount, so that you can justify your CEWS application. We had a question on the line about this one. Does the company have to have a My Business account to apply for the CEWS or CEWS? No, they don't. If you can get it done through your accountant. If your accountant has the rep-a-client access to your CRA account, you can do it that way. Or if you want to do it yourself and you don't have a My Business account, you can use the web forms application. So this is for some of you who might have had a web access code. This is something that you can use to use that. Okay, again, links will be available to this after the session. All right, next up is the commercial Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance program. So this was announced late last week. We got some further details over the ensuing days. It's not yet available, but essentially this is a subsidy. It's given to the property owners that and then they can pass that on to their tenants. So there's a clause in there that will get the subsidy if they're going to pass the rent relief on to their tenants. And the feds have also started cooperating with the provinces to roll this out. The latest is that this is supposed to be operating by mid-May. And for landlords that are going to do this, they can retroactively apply it to April and May rents. And of course, June when it comes up. So a lot of people were asking for that. It's still not official formal yet, but more details are coming as we go. All right. Okay, that's that question. Okay, this one is the NRC IRAP program. So this is meant for companies that do not qualify for the other government relief programs. So if you're not going to be part of the CEWS, you can apply for this program. It's really great for very early stage companies who maybe have a couple of employees, maybe they're pre-revenue, and they just really have been ramping up over the last year. Great program. It's we covered this on last Thursday's chat in detail. So if you want to go back and listen to the recording for that, you'll get some insights from one of the attendees on the chat who actually applied for this program. And so there's some good insights there. They're looking for numbers of people who are on payroll, not the payroll amount. They're certainly looking for your basic kind of IRAP qualification programs. You have to be doing things that are innovative and be sort of in the sphere of IRAP in general to qualify for this one. It's not a huge program, but it's something. Okay, and last but not least, there's support for students out there. There is, so if some of your employees are students, or you know some students in your network, they can get some small stipend to help cover living expenses. This is similar to the CERB, but whereas the CERB was intended for people who have lost income, maybe students would need to also cover maybe books and materials and things like that. So follow the link through and you can get some of that information there. Okay, note on the line about the IRAP application in details. It asks for how important the company is in the supply chain, and startups are not here yet. Yeah, I completely agree, but I'm not sure if that's an eligibility requirement or not. It might just be information gathering and maybe factor into the whole application for what's going on. So it may make sense to work through the application process anyway and see what happens. Okay, I will pause there. And Aislinn, if you want to, can you open up the lines, please, so we can, if anyone has a question, that they can ask it here.
I could ask a question, Ian.
Yeah, go ahead.
The business rent assistance, might that apply for companies whose teams are totally virtual?
I would doubt that it would, unless, yeah, no, I can't see the way that it would, because it's really intended for landlords to pass that on to their commercial tenants. Do you have like a work from home situation with most people on the team?
Yeah. We don't, as you know, we don't have an office, but yeah, people are still working from home, and presumably everybody is in their tax returns demonstrating a certain amount of expense towards rent as deductible. And I'm speaking, I presume, for anybody on the call that doesn't have an office.
Yeah, from what I've read, it seems like no, that this is really for commercial properties. The subsidy goes directly to landlords of a certain class of property, the property owners there, and it requires that they pass that savings on to the commercial tenants. So work from home situations wouldn't be factored into this kind of thing.
And that does make sense. It's just I thought a question worth asking.
Yeah, it's always worth a try there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's my understanding
Exactly.
too, the bit I know about it is that it's quite explicit that 50% of your lease agreement, bricks and mortar, whether that's even in a co-working space, if you were in that situation, I believe that would cover too. So I believe the numbers were 50% the federal government will cover. Going back for April, May, and June right now, I think it's those 3 months that they're looking at, unless they've updated that since last week. And then the onus is on the the landlord to cover 25%. So that means that the business would only have to cover 25%, not unlike the same number of 25% of needing to cover your employee's expense to bring them back to, if I get the numbers right there. Perhaps Ian, you can clarify or correct me on that one.
Yeah, no, those were the numbers that I had as well. So thanks for bringing them up. It's going to be the money flows from the top down. So the landlord's landlord is going to be the one that acts on this, and money will need to trickle down. So our office is in a co-working space as well. We're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen because we're not directly the tenant of the landlord. And some might say that we're receiving a service or a membership. You know, I don't know the rules yet, and I'm not sure that they're all written. And we're waiting to hear more details on that. But we do know that some landlords have been proactive on this and are already offering reductions in rent for short term. So that's encouraging to see.
Interesting.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next bit, which is about pivots. So when thinking about businesses pivoting, my top tips were, first of all, that inspiration comes from the most unexpected places. And I think a lot of us realize that about innovative sort of things. If we're just staring at the problem, then our brains can get in a rut on things. And so it does make sense to sort of take a breath, take a step back, and really look around for things that you might not normally think are related to what you do. And then you get that kind of aha moment for an inspiration for a pivot. So we're going to do a little bit of that inspiration seeking today. The next tip that I had was to really plan from strengths. So think about what you're really good at the core, and that's going to make your pivot more successful than if you were just looking at opportunities. So we'll go through SWOT analysis a little bit. And the next thing is to move quickly, but spend carefully. So this is not a time where we can spend months in planning. We do have to move fast. And I know a lot of companies on the call will be, you know, in that startup mode and making changes quickly as we go anyway. But it's even more true now that we have to move fast, do things that are going to be not really risky, but just try things, spend carefully, and make a good plan quickly. Plan quickly and fill in the gaps as you go, I think would be the mantra there. So I'm going to turn this next little section over to Denny, because when we were preparing for this, he provided me with a few examples of some inspiring pivots that he saw. And then I coined the term pivot-spiration, which I don't know if it's going to spread or if everyone's just going to think that's a dumb word. But there you go. Take it away, Denny.
Perfect. I love it. Pivot-spiration. It's a new hashtag. So we thought it would be a really good first step to look at some great businesses that have pivoted, specifically in the COVID piece here. So if we move to the next slide, we'll talk about Novo Textiles. Some of you may have heard of them. It's a Coquitlam-based company owned by a man named Jason. And he originally was creating pillows and dog beds. So he had a really strong company, very unique, of course. And he actually saw this coming a little bit earlier than most and was able to pivot into creating masks and N95 masks. So the way he did this, he actually invested $600,000 into 2 machines that were able to create these masks, as you can see in the image there. And based off of that, he was one of the few manufacturers in Canada. So again, a really great idea in terms of looking at the current situation, where people are at right now. And, you know, if you see yourself in the future losing revenue or losing some of these products and services, looking at where your strengths are, as Ian mentioned, and making that quick pivot is really important. The next one we had was, I believe, Parallel 49 Brewing. So a lot of breweries and distilleries across Canada have made this transition. For them, it's been quite easy. It's a very small workflow change and basically creating an entire new product. And I actually picked up some the other day from a company called Sons of Vancouver, which is a distillery in North Vancouver. And they had a really interesting piece where they basically created the hand sanitizer and donated half of the revenue to Lionsgate Hospital. So I was at Save on Foods, and they had those on the cashier stands, and almost every single person was buying them. So again, great pivot, really easy workflow change, bringing in some of the other people within the community and creating that community engagement, I think is a really interesting aspect. While we're on breweries, another really big segment that I've seen people pivot to is reallocating resources. So a lot of breweries, of course, go B2B, where they're actually sending their products to businesses, to restaurants. And since restaurants have been shut down for the most part, there's a lot less deliveries happening. So a lot of breweries are actually doing online sales now, where their delivery drivers, instead of doing B2B, are now B2C, so directly to consumer. And again, a very simple transition. They have the resources already, and this just allows them to maintain their employees, make sure that they're moving along and basically staying in business during this really difficult time. So I thought that was a really, really interesting model, and Parallel 49 Brewing is one of the main ones there, but we can see a lot of local breweries doing that too. So moving to the next one, we have a general store on, I believe, Main and 12th, and this was recommended to me from a good friend of mine. This is a community favorite hangout. They have everything you can imagine, from plants to board games to meals and steaks and chips and you name it. And it's a mom and pop shop. The community absolutely adores them. And when they had to shut their store, the first thing they did was take photos of their shelves and post them on Facebook. And people would basically phone them, ask them what they wanted, and pick it up in the back door. So on a super basic level, this allowed them to be more of an online commerce store and kept them in business for the next couple of weeks. And they eventually changed to, I believe, Shopify, which is an e-commerce platform. I think, Ian, you work with them quite a bit as well. So now they're doing inventory management. The online sales process is completely automated, where you put your credit card information in. And they're still having that face-to-face contact in the back of the store where they transition the products. But again, looking at the community, I think right now, anyone that can is looking to support local. So if you can make it a little bit easier for people to support you, I think it's a really, really great time to look at these different online platforms.
That's a really cool example. I like that they, the transition to e-commerce is, I guess, not hard of an intellectual leap for owners of a retail presence. I think the hard thing is for a store like this, where they had such a reliance on that community feel, that community engagement, that person, saying hello when you walk in, to transition to online is difficult. I like how they did the quick scrappy thing first before thinking about it too much. Just put up some photos and let their community support them.
Yeah, and it's as you said, I mean, in these times we need to move quickly, and even just on a very basic level, you can see right away if this is going to be a good idea or not. A lot of people say if you share your product or your service when you're 100% happy with it, you've waited too long, right? So this is a really quick pivot that you can see where the benefits are.
Very good.
So I think you had a couple as well, Ian, so I'll let you maybe talk about this great Waterloo company.
Sure, yeah. So this was, I followed this story as it unfolded because we have a client who's based in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I think Inksmith was part of the same accelerator program, or at least in the same orbit as our client. So it was really interesting to see the story unfold. The founders there started on this, and it was a bit like the Novo Textiles story. They kind of saw it coming a little bit. Their solution had been a platform and like a software platform and 3D printers that they made for education. So, students could get one of these printers and make something and have a cool educational experience for that. But back in January, February kind of time, they saw this need arising, and they decided to see if they could 3D print basically face shields for healthcare workers. But they didn't stop there. The really neat thing I think they did was to open that up and say, okay, here's the face shield, and we can sell these. But here's the plans. Here's the 3D printer files for the face shields, and they put it out there. And then so anyone in their basement with a 3D printer can go ahead and print 3D print face shields and make that available for healthcare workers. I just thought that's really fantastic. Like I said, a Canadian company, and they're making waves around the world. I saw them mentioned in an article written in London, England. So that's pretty cool. We can't forget about Bauer. They were founded in Kitchener. They make hockey, and it's not a huge leap for them to make medical PPE, since they make a lot of personal protective equipment for hockey players. So they've made a little bit of a pivot there. This next one is it's a car detailing company, one of those mobile, get the app open and they'll send a person around to clean your car and shine up the wheels and everything. It's called Spiffy. They're based in the US. They again did another thing where they recognized their strengths of, hey, we've got people who can go out there and clean things, and we're really good at organizing that and making the experience very easy for our end users. Why don't we turn our attention toward disinfecting facilities for businesses or locations that need to be open? They still need to make sure that that's sanitary. So let's send people out and do all the cleaning that's needed. So they started doing that. Kind of a neat pivot there. This next one is Punch Pass. So it's a B2B solution intended for people who own gyms and fitness studios and yoga studios and personal training, to use to sort of organize classes and manage people as they check in to classes and take payments and all that kind of good stuff. So they saw very quickly that their clients would not be able to offer in-person services to the end users. And so they quickly pivoted and they made a Zoom integration and helped their clients to organize and affect their own pivots to serve their clients online. And they did this very quickly. In 1 week, they stood up a Zoom integration. Now, I'm sure it wasn't perfect. I'm sure there were glitches and stuff in it. But the point is they were able to identify what they needed to do to quickly move and support their community. And they just stuck in a Zoom integration. All right, here's some other famous pivots, hopefully for inspiration for everyone. Netflix, I'm sure some of us remember that they used to send you DVDs in the mail. I think I used to have a couple of those come to me. PayPal, Elon Musk's old company, used to be sending IOUs on Palm Pilots. And then they transitioned into sending funds via email, along when email and eBay were becoming very popular, and the rest is history. Airbnb famously pivoted from a company that offered air mattresses on the floor to all the experiences that they do now. Twitter, many people don't know, I think it was called Odeo or something like that, or it used to be an app for podcasting. But then, of course, Apple just took over that space with their own podcast app. And so they did a hackathon. They did multiple hackathons, the founders there. And one idea that came up was posting your status. And so that became Twitter. Western Union used to send telegrams. And then, of course, the telephone came along. What are we going to do now? They had multiple different business interests. And so they were able to recognize one that would last, and that was obviously sending money. Let's see, Slack, many people don't know, started off as a video game company. And they made a game, and it was not well received. But they had along the way invented a tool for communicating amongst the team. And they, what was the quote? They made them very effective at not producing a good game, or something like that. But anyway, they recognized that strength in their team, and they were able to turn that into an opportunity once they started saying, hey, does anyone else want to use this tool? And then the long and famous Nokia story of multiple industries. Before they made cell phones, they did pulp and paper, rubber, and cables. Eventually they got bought by Microsoft, and that story didn't end well, but they had a lot of twists and turns along the way. Okay. So that's pivots, and I'll just pause there. Does anyone else want to add any inspiration for pivots that they've seen?
Yeah, I can add a couple things, both personally and also through stories I've heard through Startup Vancouver, if you'd like, Ian.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Another one on Main Street too. I know Danny mentioned that Welks is doing great things on Main Street, and we live close to Main Street, so we've been part of that story and helping them out and seeing that pivot that they're doing to recalibrate what they're doing. Another one almost across the street, excuse me, from them is a small company that creates custom 3D printed shoes. Sneakers. It's called Casca, C-A-S-C-A, and they're closed right now. I walked by it the other day, and they are giving back by doing the same as the Waterloo example you gave, that they are printing face shields that they are donating also. So lots of good things going on there, giving back rather than just, I want to say, feeling sorry for yourself, because a lot of people are really down right now and very anxious and even depressed, but finding ways to give back that also allow yourself to, not unlike what you're doing here, Ian, being a thought leader in the space, providing value in some way that that really helps the community, and figure it out as you go. So that's another great example there. Also from a personal side, one of the other hats I wear is as an entrepreneur, not just as the community leader for Startup Vancouver, and in the sport innovation space, especially the golf innovation space. So we've been working the last year or so developing and working with Cineplex and PGA Tour events to create this awesome fan experience that right now, since people can't gather, it's like, well, that's not going to work. And we've already built our prototype of this whole gamified system that we're going to have, and it's awesome. And Cineplex loves it. The PGA Tour loves it. But it's like, well, talk to us in 2021. So once again, rather than saying, well, let's just shelve that and not worrying about that, we've just pivoted or recalibrated in two ways. One is that we're now focusing on the development aspect of it, but still maintaining those relationships with the customers. And I was just on with Cineplex for 40 minutes the other day. It's like, well, what do you need? Trying to understand their new needs and future needs. And the other one now that came out of us doing a bit of a mini hackathon ourselves is like, well, since we don't know if it's 6 months or 8 months or 24 months that people can gather in the way that we need them to, what can we do in the meantime? So now we're going to be developing a mobile game app that replicates what we're creating. So in a way, it's a minimum viable product just to get it out there. So we've also pivoted in that way, rather than just sitting back and going, oh, geez, we're not going to be able to do anything for the next while. It's like, no, we've flipped around how we're going to approach this and how we can work with the hand that's been dealt everybody here, rather than just, do nothing or just grumble about it. There you go.
Very cool. Yeah, good on you, Colin. That's a great story. It occurs to me that the pivots are coming because companies are asking their community, what do you need? And doing brainstorming sessions or hackathons to talk to people internally or peers about what could be done, and then putting it out there. Hey, we have this idea. What do you think? And then that turns something that can be a stressful situation into just a little bit of momentum. That's like, hey, that's a good idea. I would like that. And then that feeds the engine of innovation further forward.
Absolutely. I'm sure Danny can jump in on this one too, but now is the time more than ever for all the entrepreneurs out there to do what I'm trying to do. It's like, get out there and ask your potential customers or prospects what they need, where their pain points are, and do it in a way that doesn't seem like you're trying to sell. Just do it just as I position. I just want to understand and see if there's some way that we can help. and see where things fall in the next while. It's one of those things
Sure.
of just reaching out to your existing customers, the relationships you have, and just to keep the conversation going in some meaningful way, that it's not just you just asking or doing that hollow thing. We're here to help and support. It's like, well, what does that really mean? So, like I said, I'm sure Danny could probably add some thoughts on that one too.
Okay, well, we'll move into the next section about planning the pivot. Just before we get there was a question on the line for how can a pre-revenue, pre-product or market fit company give back other than just those fluffy messages. My answer to that might just be if you've already identified the kinds of clients or companies that you'd like to go after, instead of going after them with your fully developed product, is just say, hey, we've got some tech, you're going through some problems, let's see if we can apply our smarts, as consultants, to solve a particular problem for you, because I'm sure you've got lots of them. And maybe that might be a way to go about it without going into the specifics of your situation, but maybe we can chat about that another time. All right, Danny, can you take us through some of the planning for a pivot? How would you plan marketing? How would you plan talking about this with the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, those great points and great questions. So the 5 Ps or 4 Ps of marketing is price, place, promotion, and product. I actually like to call this the 5 Ps of entrepreneurship, and I added in people myself. I'm not sure if it belongs there or not, but it really is the full entrepreneur cycle, right? Marketing is a small component of this, but when we're looking at the 5 Ps, we see each one an opportunity to pivot and potentially provide more relevance to our customers. And I think that helps to answer that question as well. Even if you are pre-revenue, where can you make this change that it really impacts your clients and your customers? So for example, price, hopefully you're not working with your price too much. If you're discounting your product or service, it's not a good sign, because you're losing your value from the product and service. But an example of this, again, going back to the Sons of Vancouver piece here, is if you're potentially donating some of that money and some of the profits to one of your local community shops, such as Lionsgate Hospital, that's a really good way to gain more community involvement and potentially get that product and service out there a little bit more. Place, we discussed a lot about, moving to an online platform, because nowadays you can't do face-to-face. So Shopify is a great resource for online platforms and inventory management. I know WooCommerce is a similar platform as well. Or even if it's very basic, going to Facebook and Twitter and trying to move it onto a social media page, you can see one step at a time, and if you see those benefits, you can gradually move along, right? Promotion, so this goes into understanding your target audience. If you know where they are right now, where you can reach them, then you can figure out how to get in front of them with your product and service, and again, how you can increase your value to the customer or client. And then product, as we saw, there's quite a few businesses out there that have pivoted to a similar product, but completely different. So the idea of Novo Technology, for example, the idea of Barrow is another great example. A pretty basic pivot in terms of workflow, nothing much change from a manufacturing standpoint, but it's a completely different product that helps out a completely different set of customers. And then lastly, people. So my example of people is basically changing your audience altogether. And as I mentioned, I work quite a bit with accounting firms and trying to grow that cloud division. So if you look at the industry right now, as an example, a large percentage of restaurants are really struggling. So they're holding off on potentially a lot of the accounting platform product. So if you're taking your service, nothing really changes. But if you switch your niche from restaurants to not-for-profits, for example, or some type of other niche that is really booming and growing right now, you're basically changing your target audience. Everything else is staying the same. And there's a lot of impact that you can have for people that really need those services. So those are my examples. Ian, do you have any thoughts on those, or anything that you've seen from some of your clients that have made these changes?
No, I think you covered it really well. I think the last point is that they just all have to hang together. So your market segment might be more or less price sensitive. So, I mean, you have to adapt your strategy. Your product may be more or less amenable to an online sale. So you have to adapt how you're promoting it. Or if there's a piece of the engagement or sort of free trial option that can be easily sold online, great, and then the enterprise sale follows. And I'm not sure. So it just means that it when you're coming up with the marketing plan for the pivot, is just write out these categories and go, how do they all fit together?
Absolutely. And I think the golden quote, at least what I learned back in university, was if you have the perfect product or service, the perfect promotions, you're getting in front of people, it's at the right place and it's at the right price, that's how you succeed. That's the pathway. So they do need to line up, as you mentioned. And right now, if we're talking about pivots, looking at the easy wins, how you can change maybe one of these aspects to get back on the right track.
Okay. And so that might mean rewriting your marketing plan, or if you didn't have a proper marketing plan, this is, again, something that can be done quickly on one piece of paper. Write these things down exactly and be as clear and specific as you can. And if you can get it down on one piece of paper, great, and then fill in the gaps as you go. All right, let's talk about that, creating a marketing plan. These pieces, can you take us through the elements of the rudimentary marketing plan that we're going to want to put in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So step one is certainly understanding not only your internal strengths and weaknesses, but the external opportunities and threats. So where are you succeeding right now, and where do you see those weaknesses? And it's helpful to see a competitive analysis as well. So if you have a few competitors in your space that may be doing really well in some aspects and weaknesses in others, it helps you to get started in this process. And then again, in the external environment, looking at exactly where these opportunities lie and some of the threats that we're seeing. Based off of this, and I would recommend spending at least a few hours on this, try to get your mind as open as possible. Ian referenced earlier that this is a time to take a step back from the business, have a really high view oversight into it, and try to come up with some of these ideas from scratch. Sometimes a bottle of beer or a glass of wine helps with this, just to kind of get everything out there. But I've always found that actually that's is a really good situation. Like, again, spend a few hours on this, and even if you have a friend that can work through you, and you get some great ideas from that. So based off of that, you're able to create these SMART goals. So you can see some type of opportunity out of this, and you create these SMART goals that is basically where you want your business to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and a year. And for those of you that don't know the SMART acronym, it is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. So it just needs to be really well defined. So once you have that outcome, then you can start to create these tactics. And the tactics for me are basically, KPIs and milestones. So for example, if you want to increase your Facebook following by 50% by end of month, this random example, what is it that you're going to need to do to get to that position? So you need to create posts every week, you need to create content, and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you want to go to a certain revenue by the end of year, what is it that is going to take you to that level? And if you write these milestones on a monthly basis and then drill down onto a weekly and daily basis, then you have your roadmap. And without a roadmap, you're going to be lost. I know, Ian, you've done quite a bit of work with, I think, roadmaps and KPIs. Do you have any insight onto that?
Really just that what gets measured is what makes the difference. And there's a lot of art to defining KPIs, but the first thing is to have them, and if you have them, then you're ahead of most people. Measure progress and surface that, and share that with the broader team. I think is a really good thing. Some people develop these KPIs and then just the leadership looks at them. Not all of them are going to be suitable for the whole team to see, but certainly there are some that you can put out there and say, hey, we're 70% of the way to our target. What is it going to take to get the rest of the 30% there, guys? And the team can help with that, or maybe if you have an advisory board or board of directors, you can share that insight with them, and certainly they can help to identify some opportunities to get the rest of the way there.
Yeah, that's a great call. I'll add to that too. So similar to the SWOT analysis, analyzing your tactics and coming up with these milestones and how you're going to get there, it's really helpful to write down as much as you possibly can. And then from that point, you can look at the easy wins that are maybe, it doesn't take much time, not much money. Some of the more long-term strategies that potentially cost money or cost time, but they're necessary in order to get your goals. Some of the long-term strategies that maybe don't have a return on investment. So if you have a big list, from there you can start narrowing down your actual plan of action. Lastly, define your target audience. And I know I jumped around a little bit around there, but I think it is important to have your tactics down packed and then define your target audience from there. The best practice for defining that audience is creating buyer personas. So if you can basically have a few people on your wall, we used to have a war room back in my app company, and we had pictures of random people, but as people that we defined as our buyer persona, our target audience. And underneath that would be their demographics, so their age, their income, again, just rough estimates, but you just want to define that person. And then it goes into where do they spend their time? So do they read magazines? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Where can you reach out to them where it's a really strong communication? And the reason behind this is everything should fall through that target audience and that buyer persona. An example is in the app company, again, feature releases. So we come up with a feature and we look at the buyer personas and we'd say, who does this benefit? And if it doesn't benefit Bob or it doesn't benefit Linda, then why are we launching that feature? Why are we spending time on that? So I think it's really important to come back to what is the outcome? Who is it for? And everything should be around that outcome.
Very good. I think one other point as relates to audience and tactics, we might say that we're really good at executing on events, or we're really good at advertising as our tactic. Okay, there's the other step of where does your audience participate, and that might mean a shift in strategy. So if we're really good at say events and conferences, but we're going after an audience that doesn't typically attend events and conferences, then a change in tactics is probably warranted. So the two, I think, have to go together. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead. Denny, did you have anything else on that?
No, I think that's perfect. Colin, do you have anything to add?
What you said. No, I think you really nailed it there. Everything that you just said also applies to the example that I gave there too, that I said I'm reaching out to real people that are potential customers, buyers, users, these personas, to see how things have changed. It's like, obviously the product that we're creating doesn't work right now, might never work actually again, hopefully not, but we can't just hope. Hope is not, I think Obama said it one time, I think, or Clinton actually said, hope is not a strategy, right? And in this case here, we need to actually look at different ways. So everything you said, I've already been applying that, and you've added some other nuggets of wisdom there that I will be incorporating into what we do also. And hopefully everybody else on the Zoom call today will do the same. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Sounds good. One question that we as an accounting and CFO firm get asked is, when we're preparing the budget or the forecast for the company, is what should I be spending? Right? How do I know what to set aside for marketing? So two answers to that. I'll try and give some more specifics, but two answers to that. One is what you're thinking is probably not enough. And two is don't spend too much. and that's really hard and contradictory information, but I'll get into it in just a second. So rules of thumb that have been kicking around the marketing world since I got out of undergrad are that the spend on marketing should be about 5% of total revenue for a company that wants to maintain their market position, up to about 10% of total revenue for a company that wants to grow. More if you want to grow faster. This includes spend on people, employees, service providers, and also things like advertising fees or campaign fees and execution. So that's the general rule of thumb. But we're not just going to spend that and hope for the best. We're looking for an ROI on that. So it should generate about 5 times the spend comes back to you. And if you're not, then you need to relook at what your marketing campaigns are doing. So these are rules of thumb, and they're going to be different for every business, but at least it's a starting point. So you know if you're spending 1%, maybe you need to think about increasing your spend. The second piece of that is don't spend too much. So what I like to advise for companies that are growing quickly or growing into new markets or doing new things is to just spend a small amount at first. Test, see what is working. Don't go out there and spend $25,000 on radio ads or TV ads. It's not going to come back to you in a return, because chances are at this point you haven't figured out your exact messaging, your exact targeting, and exactly how to effectively use that particular tactic as part of your overall strategy. So do the small things, do the free things, obviously. Do the things that you can do without spending a lot of money, and test as much as you can. There's a shortcut to testing, which is to hire somebody who's done this a lot before, somebody who's maybe run marketing campaigns before. They've been look for somebody who's been a marketing manager within a company, has a few companies under their belt, or who's been a marketing director, not necessarily somebody who's only worked for a marketing agency. That would be my suggestion, because that sort of person has been responsible for marketing and been responsible for the marketing budget and the marketing results, and they were measured on and hired or fired based on those results. And they have a deep knowledge of what to do and managing things across different disciplines within marketing. So that would be a good person to work with. Denny is one such person. I am one such person. There are other people in our networks that are. So if you're looking for that kind of talent, then please reach out to us. That will cut the trial and error piece down, because they'll be able to tell you not to waste your money on X, Y, or Z, because that probably won't work for you or your particular target market. And they might have some tricks in their toolkit about tactics that worked before within a particular kind of execution. So that's thing number one. You obviously can't afford to do everything all at once. So it really makes sense to pick 2 or 3 things at most to try out at a time. I've put some prices down here for just based on my experience for small and growing companies, what they have, or I might go so far to say as should think about spending if they're considering a particular type of tactic. So for instance, e-commerce or website build, you can find people who will offer to build you a website for $500, but I can pretty much guarantee you that's not going to be what you want at the end of the day. It's going to be too hard to maintain, or just half a site, not well considered, basically a template. You have to do all the work. Probably not going to be what you want to do. At the same time, you probably don't need to spend $30,000 on a website. I've built $30,000 websites before. You don't need that for a really small company who's looking to move quickly. So look to spend somewhere in that range, and it doesn't have to be all at once either. I mean, you can, like I said, test. You can get started with somewhere in the lower end of that range and then add to it as you go. Similarly, for things like Google ads and Facebook ads, there's a sort of sweet spot. If you're less than these kind of dollars, then you're probably not going to get much traction, not going to be able to test any results. So try putting some money into it, and with some experience to back you up from a service provider, and you should be able to figure out what works pretty quickly. But don't spend too much, because you're going to waste before you've done all the learning. Social ads, same thing. The sweet spot seems to be $10 to $20 per day per ad. So run a couple of ads and you'll get some test results. Do rapid testing. This is really important. Service providers, I've worked with and for agencies before, and their services, say they're doing SEO for you, they're going to be charging somewhere $1,000, $1,500 per month, $2,000 per month per campaign that you're doing. Sounds like, for many companies, it sounds like an investment, but SEO is a long-term investment. Get some help. I think if you spend the $1,500, you're going to save yourself at least that amount of money in wasted ad spend and time. And print stuff is more expensive, obviously, because you have some production element to it. I'll cut it short there, and if anyone has any questions about that, you can ask. The other element is about how much do I need? So I always encourage people to start with how many clients they need to get and work that back. So you're going to have some conversion rates, and I've put some example ones up there just for simple maths purpose. But let's say you want to get one client, and of every 10 opportunities that you open up and put in your sales pipeline, one of them converts into a client. That's 10%. So you need 10 opportunities. Well, let's say that to get 10 opportunities, you need 100 real leads that come in through your website. But let's say half the leads that come in through your website, the inquiries that come in through your website are just kind of junk. They're not really leads that people want to do business with you. So then you have to scale that up. That means 200 inquiries. Well, what kind of traffic does a website need to get 200 inquiries? Well, maybe your website converts. The conversion rate is 2%. So that would mean 10,000 visitors to get one client. So this would be a profile for maybe a software company that sells to medium-sized businesses. The ticket value is reasonable, and they can spend this kind of money. If you're spending this kind of marketing effort to get one client for a grocery delivery company or something that has a much smaller ticket price, then these numbers aren't going to work for you. So it's going to be different for each company, but definitely map this out for what's the conversion rates for each step of your marketing and sales funnel. And that will lead to how many visitors you need to get, how much engagement in the market you need to get to achieve those results. And then you can translate that back into how much money you need to spend on marketing and advertising. Okay, so those are numbers. I've thrown a lot out at you, and I'll just stop here for Q&A. I realize we're kind of at time. I'm happy to hang out for a little bit longer if anyone wants to keep chatting. Aislinn, would you mind opening up the microphones in case there are questions on the line? Thank you. Questions on? Hey, maybe it turns out that I talked too much and people end up having to go. So I'm sorry for going over time, guys.
That was great stuff that you offered there. So as part of your pivot there, Ian, am I taking away here that you're not only offering accounting and bookkeeping services through Entreflow, but also your marketing expertise these days? Or has that always been there and we just didn't know it?
It's always been there. You just didn't know it. It's something that we're not a marketing agency. We don't pretend to be, but we'll certainly be happy to help out our clients. It's kind of not our main go-to-market, if you will. So we typically work with companies that end up having this kind of need, and then we can come and help them on a strategic level with this kind of stuff. But we don't advertise ourselves as a marketing agency.
There we go. Well, perhaps something we can do offline for the next week or so is with my podcast, of course, now that with everybody staying home and just hungry for engaging inspirational content, that I've already noticed that there's been a spike in our downloads and now creating more content. So as part of my pivot is also doubling down on that. So I am looking to put together a marketing strategy. And I've got a couple of ideas, but not being a marketing person, perhaps we can use me as a case study and perhaps a client that then we can share with the audience of, if that's something that you're interested in, of how you can help the podcast not only grow, but to engage with an audience, but also to use that as a funnel to bring in more sponsors. So if you want to talk offline in the next couple of days about that, Ian, I'm more than welcome to do that.
No problem. Friendly chats are free. Happy to help.
There we go.
Looks like we did have a question on the line. Does Intuit have suggestions for managing cash flow during pivots in recessions? So I guess that's a question for Denny. Do you have anything to say there?
Yeah, I would say, of course, our products, we have QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. They're fantastic for managing cash flow. The main piece of that, of course, is garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to ensure that you do have really good information. And a firm such as Entreflow, of course, is a really good step in that direction, or if you have internal people as well. With regards to cash flow forecasting specifically, I know, Ian, you and Helena also work with quite a few different third-party applications that add on to Intuit products. You want to talk about them?
Sure. Off the top of my head, there's Helm, Helm is one. Dry Run is another. There's a tool called Cashflow Frog. That's a good one that we've recently started playing with. Entreflow has its own free spreadsheet-based tool, which we've been using for years and has lots of cool, complicated formulas and pretty graphs in it, which we've made freely available. So you're free to check that out. You can find that on our website. And there are some good tools that are sort of for more long-term cash flow forecasting. And so that might be a tool called Jirav. That's more so for month over month, and you can stretch that out to years. Whereas the other ones I mentioned are more so for the short term, days, weeks, a few months.
Spotlight and Fathom fall into those as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Spotlight and Fathom, I put those in the same kind of category as Jirav. Also wonderful tools.
Perfect. Does that help, David? Hopefully.
Yeah, it does.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I didn't see any other questions come in off the chat, so I apologize for talking too long. If you have any other questions, please email me and or Denny, and we'll be happy to answer them by email after the fact. Recordings are going to be posted online later today or early tomorrow, as soon as we can get them up there, along with all the links. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much. Special thank you to Denny and to Colin for joining us and helping us out with sharing this content. And to all the participants on the line, I really appreciate that you're making time out of your day to come together and help us support our local business community in Canada. Your participation makes us richer for everybody, so appreciate it. And please help us share the love by sharing these posts that you see go up on your social media networks, so that we can have more and more people coming on and sharing their rich knowledge and expertise. So with that, I'll leave you there, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and good luck with your pivots out there. And we'll see you again on Thursday, where we'll be talking about pivots from an HR perspective. See you then.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Colin. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, all right.
Bye.